Placing this top cowl panel up here while we wait for the headers, oil pan, and a couple other parts to come in. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, as you can see here, this has a 90-degree lip on it, but this panel does not. And if you look a little bit closer, you can see spot welds. So we're going to have to go through and drill these spot welds out. And then we got all this chunky goodness that's falling out of the corner here, and we'll get this cut off. We already got the seam peeled back a little bit as well. So we're going to cheat a little bit. We already drilled our spot welds out, but it's kind of a pain in the ass getting under there to pry them and pop them loose. So we're going to use the plasma and come in about 1 inch and just cut lines, take the center section out, and then we can get the edges off. So and this is what we call a thermal event. Have this center section cut out. It's a lot easier to get in here with a hammer and chisel and peel back that layer. This might not seem like a very structurally important part, but it really is, because it ties the top of the firewall to the base of the windshield mount, which also helps give some of the structural integrity to your pedal mount back here. Once you get your spot welds drilled out, just take a hammer and chisel and just work it back piece by piece, and hopefully it'll come off like this. Then we'll work on getting this piece off and getting our new piece fitted. Well, unfortunately, we found more than we wanted to. Obviously, the little holes we knew about, and then it got much worse down here. This, again, is an important piece, so we're actually going to replace this whole piece all the way across. So we'll be doing that in a later video and getting that taken care of once it comes in. We're moving on to the tailgate. You see I already welded a couple holes up back here, but we had some cancerous spots where it rotted out down in the bottom. So we rough cut a piece of sheet metal a little bit bigger than what we need, and we're going to lay it out and just kind of make a mark. Again, a little bit more than what we need. Better to have too much than not enough. We'll make a line across here, square this up, and then we'll start kind of test fitting it in there and just see what we end with, more or less. Here on the original panel, we did have to cut into a curve. So you do need to make this curve again. You don't want a sharp 45 there, because then it'll just, well, it'll look like garbage. So we're going to roll an edge. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going to go ahead and get it close to shape, and then we'll probably hammer it in the rest of the way. We went ahead and made marks on our new panel. Again, this is not perfectly straight or perfectly ready to fit. We're just going to go ahead and get the general shape, and then we'll trim it so we know to go here and here. And then we can roll our edge over. Now you can do this by hand. You can put it in the vise over here and clamp it in and kind of just work it a little bit at a time. Or if you have a slip roll, you can roll the edge. You can also take a round piece of pipe and lay it on top and hammer it over. I've also used several different objects like a round pin or a bolt and laid it across and then formed it over it with a hammer. That works as well. But today what we're going to do, since it's such a small piece and it's hard to use it in the slip roll for that little edge and it takes a lot of hammering to do it, we're going to use our brake. This is only a 24-inch finger brake, box brake, pan brake, whatever you want to call it. This is from Eastwood. Just kind of put it in your first set of marks and clamp it down, and once you get it lined up where you want it, and then just give it a little bump. Then you're going to loosen it, pull it out just a little bit, same thing, little bump. We're not going to go crazy because again we're just trying to get a general shape, and it may not be perfect, but it'll get us started in the right direction. And you can just keep working that back and forth as you please if you want to go to the middle or the beginning and give it a little more of a curve, whatever works for you. Well, as you can see here, we've got our panel in place. Now we've only got a couple tacks holding it in just to make sure that it's going to work. You do want to make sure you have a gap all the way around on your joint. If it's completely pushed tight all the way around, after you weld it and go to grind it, you may go through a little bit of a gap. Make sure that you get penetration all the way through and that you're fully forging the pieces together. Now if you notice over on this side there's a more significant gap, and that's because I cut too much, but it's okay. We can weld it up and fill it up. When you're tacking, make sure you go around, move around. If you start seeing the metal get discolored or you start burning through holes, you've gotten it too hot, stop. Let it cool. Do a couple tacks, come back. You don't necessarily want to throw cold water or anything on it, but sometimes you can take room temperature water on a rag and just lightly dampen it around. It's usually not too bad. So we're going to go ahead and continue tacking this and get it a little more into shape and hammer it and beat it and bang it and all that good stuff. Let's go. Well, and there you go. Look at that. Not looking too bad. We got it all welded up, ground it down a little bit. Remember, do not go crazy with the grinder. You can burn through it just like anything else. I also like using these discs right here on my little air grinder. They're super helpful for getting into tight spots and over different shapes. Now that we have our patches done on the tailgate and on the back, we've got some parts. Let's show you what we got. We got our oil filter relocation kit, headers, oil pan, and steering column. There's the other header. First, let's talk about the headers. Customer opted for stainless steel headers. They do come with your V-band style clamps, which we'll take a closer look at. Complete stainless steel construction, nicely done, and it is made for this engine in this truck. So in theory, it should fit. They also supply Ford OEM style gaskets. This kit is from a company called KMF. Let's take a little bit closer look at the header construction and the V-band clamps, and then we'll go ahead and get these installed. Again, these headers are stainless steel. They were fully welded on the inside, and then they smoothed them out. On the outside, they've only got a couple tacks that are visible. Where they joined all their different connections, you can still see the welds. They did smooth them out a little bit, but they are kind of inconsistent, but that doesn't change how they perform. And honestly, you're really not going to see them that much, so it does not matter. They did go ahead and equip it with the O2 sensor bung, and as you can see, they welded on these V-band style exits. I do prefer this style, and it does come with the clamp and the attaching ring. I like the way that these hook up just because, to me, I feel like they have a better seal, and you're not having to worry about gaskets blowing out. And the clamp just fits nice and tight around there. And also, if you ever have to disconnect the exhaust or remove it, it's a lot more simple. And again, you don't have to worry about cutting welds off or blowing out new gaskets or anything like that. And they usually seal up very well. Again, they did supply it with a Ford metal gasket. We're going to go ahead and get these fitted on and see how it looks. Now we're over here on the passenger side, and you can see it's got these studs that hold them on, and they're kind of in the way. Again, this is another thing that there's hardly no room, and I've got the engine jacked up right now. This would be a lot easier to do with the engine out of the vehicle, but we didn't have the headers at the time. Another thing you can do, which I think we're going to do in this application, is you can take these studs out. They have inverted Torx on them. We can remove these studs, and it'll give us a lot more room. We can set them in, and then we can put the studs back in with the headers in place. So yeah, let's do that. If we can get this header back out of here. So we used our number 8 inverted Torx bit, and we removed all the bottom studs. They came out pretty easy. We're going to leave the top ones in. We've got our gasket hung on there, and we should be able to feed our header in a little bit easier now. And hopefully, when we get up into place, we'll be able to roll it onto the studs. If not, we'll be taking the top ones off. And we'll be taking the top ones off. Again, this all could have been avoided if we would have just had these on before we set the engine in. But that's not what happened, so. These really don't seem like they're going to fit. They're hitting this shock tower already. Ooh, it's going to be interesting. And this is the part where I probably should have read the instructions that KMF provides with the headers. See all these bolts? supposed to take the studs out anyway. Great news, right? And for our next obstacle, you really can't see it, but right in here, the header is hitting on the bell housing, so we're going to pull them back off, and it looks like we're going to have to trim a little bit where the starter mounts to make them fit. Alright, let's get it back out again for the 10th time. Remember, if somebody says something's bolt in, they're probably lying. So it's hitting on this boss right here, which looks like it's actually part of the engine block, and I'm going to deem it as unimportant. So we're going to grind this down, and let's try it again. And back in again. Alright, that looks promising so far. And we're not hitting. Yay! Alright, time for gasket and a couple bolts. They do provide the torque values and torque pattern in the instructions as well. And they do recommend that after you drive it for a while, you go back and re-torque them. They say do not use any kind of Loctite or anything like that. For those of you who don't know, a lot of times Loctite is pointless on exhaust because guess what releases Loctite? Heat. So if you Loctite exhaust bolts, you're really just pissing in the wind in most cases. If you do have a problem with them loosening up, you can always do something like mechanics wire, safety wire, drill holes in the studs, so on and so forth. So we're going to get all the bolts started in by hand, and then we'll get the engine set back down where it's supposed to be, make sure everything clears. So on the driver's side, there are some other dilemmas. One, the steering shaft is in the way, but that's coming out anyway because we have a new steering column. We also need to remove this brake proportioning valve to create more clearance as well, and then we're going to follow the same procedure and see how the header fits on this side. Again, delicately take care of that. Oh, that's a problem. That's right in the way too. Might be part of the reason with our headers too is the engine's actually sitting on this bracket, so we'll have to get this out of the way as well. Oh, there we go. I don't know what this bracket is for, but don't need it no more. On the driver's side, we're going to do the same thing. Put the ass of the header in towards the transmission first, and then we're going to slide it up. Ta-da! Gasket and some bolts. Alright, we're going to go ahead and tighten these bolts up and add two more. Then we're going to drop this down, and hopefully now that that bracket is out of the way and not pushing on the head, the engine will sit down and it won't hit the header on the passenger side. Cross your fingers. Alright, engine's back down in place. Driver's side fits beautifully. Plenty of clearance at the moment. Passenger side is still very close to the shock tower, but we have just a little bit of light coming through there. Again, the engine can be moved and shifted around just a little bit. There is some play in it, so we should be able to move it around enough to get enough play to make a decent enough gap so when the engine's running it doesn't hit that shock tower. That's our main concern. All in all, really nice quality kit, and if you read the instructions, you'll save yourself a lot of time. Also, put the headers on before you put the engine in. It would have been way easier. I said it like 5 times already, I know, but I'm an idiot and we're learning. The next stuff we have on the list, we still have that oil pan we need to put on, so this way the pan will clear the axle, which will also help the engine go down a little bit and also may resolve some of our clearance issues. Because right now the pan is still touching the front axle. We've also got the steering column to put in, and we also have, what else was there? The oil filter relocation kit. I think we're going to do the relocation kit next. The oil filter relocation kit is an MMR kit for the 5.0 and 5.2 Coyote setup. Now this is a really nice looking kit. I've used MMR stuff before and it works just fine, but there are a couple things. We'll go over the parts that come with it. You have your oil line. It also comes with 2 different blocks. Obviously this one goes on the engine, and this one is where you mount your oil filter. You'll notice on here that they are labeled in and out, and it specifically says in the instructions when you're plumbing these, you don't plumb in to in and out to out. In to out, out to in. Otherwise, you can have 0 oil pressure. It does come with -10 fittings, and it comes with your O-rings as well, and it also comes with your threaded bung. All right, and the block is going to face upright like this. You can just leave 1 bolt in there for now if you want. Again, this is something that would have been way easier to do while the engine was out, but we didn't know, so we're doing it now, and it's okay. Won't hurt anybody. Get that last bolt in and get these torqued down. Now, we are going to screw the fittings in here, but we are going to cap them off with some tape or a plastic cap to keep any dirt or debris from getting in there. The next part of this kit we're going to talk about is the oil filter mount itself. Again, it also has a threaded insert in here for an oil line. These fittings are just screwed in hand tight. They do have rubber O-rings on them. I like to oil the threads on all these fittings. I don't know why this is not pre-installed. I think it would make sense. So this just screws in. However, you know, you're thinking to yourself, how do I tighten this up without messing up the threads? Well, there are a couple options. You can find some nuts that are the same thread and try to tighten it down like that, which is really not enough. The other thing you can do is apply a little bit of Loctite to it and screw it in. And that's what we're going to do. Again, a little bit of Loctite, couple drops, leave it alone. Now that you've got your insert in there, put a little bit of oil on threads, put some oil in it if you want. Some people do it, some people don't. It's up to you. Now, that's where we stop. Now, unfortunately, we have to stop with our remote oil filter installation at this point because there's a lot of important things that need to be done on the driver's side. We need to finish hooking up the steering. The inner fenders need to be mounted as well. And there's a couple more components up here that need to be installed before we know where we are going to put our oil filter. I have a good idea on where I want to put it, but we really need to be further along. The important thing is the adapter block is on the engine block. It is capped off and sealed and ready to go. So when we do have everything else in place and we know we have a proper location for our oil filter that's accessible and out of danger in extreme heat, we can go ahead and hook up those lines. So we'll show that in a later video. Well, next up on the build is going to be this oil pan. This pan was also from KMF. It is an aluminum custom-made oil pan, and the sump has been modified for more clearance. It actually moves everything back further, so it'll actually be out of the way of the axle. I'm really excited to see how well this fits in there, and some of you may be as well. Now, some people do larger suspension lifts on these to help resolve that issue, and some people like to do modified oil pans. I've heard of some people using stamped steel pans and making them work. It's a wild looking gasket, by the way. We're going to get this installed, and in the future this chassis is going to be getting a 3-inch suspension lift if I'm not mistaken. You also notice in this box behind me, got some shiny chrome in there. I'm not going to bust it out right now or install it right now, but that's the tilt steering column that we're going to install on this vehicle. Some people have been moving the steering columns to the side to make them fit. I don't really see a need for that. We're going to install the column, and we're actually putting a slightly shorter column in, and we're going to put the steering knuckle closer to the firewall, and we'll show you that in an upcoming video as well. If you have any questions about any of the products that we used today or any of the tasks that we completed, feel free to comment below, or you can email me at greasyboycustoms@gmail.com or visit us on just about every social media site. Until next time, happy hot rodding.